An irrelevant gesture or a diplomatic turning point? An increasing number of traditional Israeli allies are publicly recognising Palestinian sovereignty. Is it a step on the path to peace, or are they rewarding terrorism as Israel claims? Stay with us for that debate coming up on Counterpoints with me, Melinda Nusafora. The UN General Assembly has been, as promised, a platform for more world leaders to formally recognise Palestine.
The time has come. I declare that France today recognises the state of Palestine.
That the United Kingdom formally recognises the state of Palestine.
The Commonwealth of Australia recognises the state of Palestine.
Those leaders argue recognition is a necessary tool to pressure both sides to reach a ceasefire and eventually a lasting peace. Currently, about 80% of UN member states recognise Palestine, and yet that's had little to no impact on the ground. So is it an empty gesture? And could it, in fact, make the situation worse? Hardline Israeli ministers are calling on the Prime Minister to annex the West Bank in retaliation.
You are giving a huge reward to terrorism. The response to the latest attempt to impose a terrorist state in the heart of our land will be given after my return from the United States. Wait for it.
Coming up on the show, we'll ask, is recognition by Western powers a significant move or just lip service to appease voters? Is Israel becoming diplomatically isolated? And what would a Palestinian state actually look like? Joining us to discuss the recognition of Palestine and its implications is Yuen, an independent Canadian senator from British Columbia. Jake Wallace-Simons, the Daily Telegraph columnist and author, is joining us. His upcoming book, Never Again: How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself. And rounding out our panel, Professor Manuel Hassasin, the current Palestinian ambassador to Denmark. Gentlemen, welcome to Counterpoints. Thanks for being with us. Now, the move by several Western powers to formally recognise the state of Palestine hasn't come as a surprise. It's been signposted for weeks, if not months even, by some countries. But still, it's unleashed diplomatic shockwaves. Outside the UN General Assembly, though, is anything likely to change? Ambassador, let's start with you. Is this a significant moment, or are these leaders just trying to appease their voters?
Well, actually, it took so long for the international community to recognize the state of Palestine. And I must say, this is the crescendo of the Palestinian diplomatic efforts in trying on bilateral, yet alone in the international organizations, to extract this kind of recognition, which is long overdue. However, I would say that symbolically, this means a lot to the Palestinian people because it will allow the state of Palestine to become part and parcel of the international community, let alone it will have the interest in having certain bilateral relations with several countries. We have been accepted, by international organizations, and I think eventually we will be full-fledged in the United Nations as a country which has its own flag and what have you. So from this perspective, I would consider that this is a milestone in diplomacy, and it is a milestone when it comes to the recognition of the Palestinian people who have been struggling for the last 70 years to attain self-determination. And this is the time where self-determination is going to be practiced. Yet we need to see on the ground how this will translate basically with the reaction of Israel and that of the United States that has been unequivocally supporting the state of Israel. Well, this can be implemented with the carnage going on in Gaza, with the settlers expanding settlements, with the Yuen plan that is, dividing the West Bank north and south. This is yet to be seen by the Israelis' response to this recognition by the international community.
Jake, you're in the UK. Your Prime Minister is one of the latest Western leaders to come out to recognise the Palestinian state. Why do you think Starmer has done that now? And do you think it's a significant milestone, or is it purely symbolic?
Well, the general feeling in Britain where Starmer is despised as a leader, his popularity is at an almost historic low at the moment. 90% of people do not support this move to unilaterally recognise a state of Palestine. And the general feeling is that he's done it for his own personal political gain. He's suffering a hemorrhaging of support from the left of his party and from the various more radical Muslim voters towards further left parties, which are springing up as I speak. And so the sense is that he's doing it really for his own domestic political reasons rather than anything that might benefit either Britain or indeed the Middle East. I mean, this clearly is a move which defies all logic. Palestine has not passed the 4 criteria for statehood as outlined in the Montevideo Convention. It also has thrown up various legal contradictions as well. I mean, the international community asserts that Palestine is at the same time occupied and also fit to become a state. That's a contradiction right there. It's a state that pays reward money to people who are convicted of terrorism. So presumably it would need to become a state and also become sanctioned as a state sponsor of terror at the same time. And of course, it really is a democracy in name alone. Its leader, Mahmoud Abbas, currently serving the 21st year of his supposed 4-year term. Elections haven't come since. And that's before we even look at Hamas and the devastation that it's wreaking in Gaza. Hamas, I would note, celebrated this move. The weak Western powers have insisted that Hamas will magically have no part in a Palestinian state. But Hamas, for its part, felt it was a victory, declared victory, congratulated our contemptible Prime Minister on this move. So overall, I think anybody with a sound moral compass will realise that this is not just bad for Britain and Israel, it's bad for the Palestinians as well, because there's no incentive for proper reform away from radicalism, which is what's sorely needed if peace is going to be achievable.
Senator Wu, what do you make of those contradictions that Jake has raised there? How does Canada, which has also recognised the Palestinian state, square that circle, those contradictions that Jake has brought up?
Well, the contradictions point to the highly symbolic nature of recognition. Symbolic but not unimportant. I agree with the Palestinian representative that it's a milestone in diplomacy and it's something that Palestinians deserve as a right that they have along with other peoples. Canada has recognized Palestine in part to, I think, balance interests domestically. There is popular support for the recognition of Palestine in this country, but this government is doing it, I think, somewhat cynically, partly to absolve itself from the horror that we are witnessing in Gaza at this very moment. And we all know that the recognition of Palestine, without any concrete action to stop the slaughter of innocents in Gaza, as well as the expansion of illegal settlements in the West Bank, is not very helpful at all. And so on the one hand, I celebrate that Canada has made this historic step, but I'm watching to see how Canada and France and Britain and other Western countries that have finally, by the way, come on board with most of the rest of the world how they intend to handle and to respond to the existential issue that faces Palestine today, which is the genocide that is going on.
We're going to come a little bit later in our debate to what a Palestinian state would actually look like. But before we get to how it's implemented, I want to come back to you, Ambassador Hassassian, with a question picking up also from what Jake has raised with regards to this criticism that's coming across all sides of Israeli politics, not just from the Prime Minister, but opposition parties as well, that say this is a reward for terrorism. How do you respond to that?
Well, if I want to respond to that, and if he means that terrorism is Hamas, I want to just tell him very simply, the UN resolutions that came out after the 67 war were all in favor of having a Palestinian state and in stopping the occupation, in ending occupation. There was no Hamas there. We have been entitled for this since 1948 through the General Assembly, UN General Assembly, when they voted and accepted us to become a state. At that time, the conditions were not right for the Palestinians to accept, on a small piece of land, the state of Palestine. So I'm trying to basically to remind him that Hamas is only a player for the last 20 years. But the international organizations and UN resolutions have always, voted for the Palestinians to have their own independent state. So it's not a reward to Hamas. The Palestinian people have paid a heavy price through the carnage, through the killings that is going on, the genocide in Gaza. Let us not forget that 4 wars have been waged against Gaza. Let us not forget that the West Bank have been, dissected into what we call Swiss cheese today, with the grabbing of land and building settlements, expanding these settlements, which they call Judea and Samaria. And that in itself, if it reflects something, that this country is a colonial settler state that is stealing our land, our water, our right to self-determination by claiming that this is Eretz Israel, this is Judea, Samaria. It was given to them by the biblical prophecy. I mean, that rhetoric is becoming absurd. It's not being accepted by the international community. And that's why, countries like Britain, France, Canada, Spain, and what have you, they came forward because they understand that the misery of the Palestinians cannot go longer with the negation of the Israelis for the presence of almost 7 million Palestinians in the occupied territories, and to claim that this is their own, and going with ethnic cleansing and displacement and what have you as a legitimate, action taken by this Israeli government that is so extreme to the point that they don't see Palestinians to be living, side by side by the Israelis.
Jake, I see you shaking your head there. What's your reaction?
Well, frankly, I'm not really sure where to start. I mean, he's right that the Palestinian Arabs rejected an offer of a state for the first time in 1947, 1948. That was not the only time, however, that they turned down the offer of a two-state solution, as it were. Of course, the Oslo Accords were well on the way to offering them a state, but that collapsed because of the Second Intifada, 140 suicide bombs launched by Hamas on Israeli cities, turning them into a butcher's shop. Then Ariel Sharon tried to give them a state by withdrawing from Gaza. That, of course, was rewarded only with October the 7th. But there have been other times as well. Camp David in 2000, President Clinton, Bill Clinton, said just last year that he looked back at 25 years ago at Camp David and couldn't believe that the Palestinians walked away from a state, and said that they can't complain 25 years later when that offer is no longer there. Ehud Olmert in 2008 offered them 100% of their demands again. They snubbed that offer. So it seems very odd now that the Palestinians are saying that they have been deprived a state when they've been offered it on many occasions and have turned it down because they don't simply want to have a state alongside Israel. They wish to have a state instead of Israel. And as for Hamas, I mean, of course, Hamas is deplorable. The international community pays lip service to wanting it not to form a part of the future Palestinian state. But we return to the fact that Hamas has been celebrating this move of international recognition for a state of Palestine. The reason it's been celebrating is because it advances its agenda. Its agenda is not a two-state solution. Its agenda is to take over Israel. Israel faces some very, very serious security risks from not just from Gaza, but also from the West Bank, where terrorism is glorified. And we have no concern coming from the other side for Israeli security at all.
Senator Wu, I'm going to bring you in just a moment, but Ambassador, I'll give you a chance to respond to that. I could see you vehemently shaking your head there.
Yes. Yes. First of all, I want to remind your guest that in 1988, the Palestinian National Council made a historic decision, which I consider to be a painful concession, in accepting the state of Israel on 78% of historic Palestine, and in accepting Israel as a state next to the Palestinians. In the Oslo Accords, we almost danced cheek to cheek in achieving that, but the ultimate failure was Camp David, where you are telling us now you put the onus on the Palestinians. How could the Palestinians accept the negligence or the negation of the right of return at Camp David, let alone when Barak was negotiating on behalf of Israel? He wanted to have total sovereignty over Jerusalem with the control over Haram al-Sharif. So Arafat had no choice but to decline that. You don't remember who caused what in Camp David that led to that failure, which of course ignited a second intifada. Now, I'm not going to talk about the intifada and the repercussions of the intifada, but I want to remind you, for the last 13 years, we haven't had any direct negotiations with the Israelis. With the ultimate presence of Netanyahu, he had made every kind of effort to kill the Oslo Agreement, which supposedly in 1999 would have offered the Palestinian a state with almost 98% of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. I'm trying to remind you that don't put always the onus on the Palestinians. And Hamas is a late player in this game. And you're telling me that Hamas is very happy for having the recognition of the state of Palestine? Hamas wanted the entire historic Palestine. They're not, for the 1967 borders, so as they could celebrate, as you are saying, the recognition of the state of Palestine. The recognition of the state of Palestine is for the Palestinian people and their struggle for self-determination for the last 70 years. This is the reward for a people that have been deprived of a basic human right, inalienable right, let alone that the Palestinians have paid in blood. Hundreds of thousands have been killed by the Israelis. And now you are claiming that you are a democratic state and that the Palestinians are not ready to have their own state. We are ready to have our own state. But we have to end this occupation that has been long overdue by the help of countries like Canada, United States. Hopefully it will jump on the bandwagon to realize that the Jewish state, which is, I consider it a Zionist state, and it's not Jewish, is about time this colonial project should be annihilated by the Jews themselves, because this is the destruction of Israel, starting with the Zionist extremists who are trying basically to negate a whole nation and trying to attack the sovereignty of Jordan, Egypt, Doha lately. This is considered to be a strategic ally to the United States and basically to Israel. Look what you have done. You have 7 fronts to fight. Is this, the way to preserve the entity of a democratic bastion in the Middle East, as you are pretending? If I may, we call you a rogue state now.
If I may, I know you wish to go to our Canadian friend, but just very, very briefly, just 2 quick questions to the ambassador there. I just wonder, first of all, are you able to condemn unequivocally the atrocities of October the 7th? And secondly, are you able to recognise wholeheartedly the right of Jews to their homeland in the state of Israel as a Jewish state? Can you make those 2 commitments right now before us today?
Let me tell you first. The second is to accept the Jewish state. We have already accepted the Jewish state. And we have been saying we will have an entity democratic next, supposedly, to a democratic state, which is Israel. We are willing to coexist in conviviality with the Jews. We have done that before, and we could do this again. The two-state solution that we have been fighting for is not negating, the state of Israel, is having Israel as a neighbor with open borders and try to coexist together. This is the intention of the Palestinian people. We have nothing against the Jewish people. We are against this Zionist project of trying to eliminate us even from the 22% of Palestine. This is where I come very strong, against the Zionist project. And concerning, October 7th, don't take this as an excuse. You should also go before October 7th. 60 years of occupation, putting 2 million people in a concentration camp. You don't talk about this. You only talk about October 7th. Let us assume that October 7th took place. Let me remind you.
Can you condemn it? Can you condemn it?
The end result of killing 65,000
simple yes or no question.
Palestinians, in
yes
Gaza, is not enough for you to say that October 7th has been avenged by the Zionist project.
Can you condemn it? Yes or no?
You don't talk about
yes or no.
the aftermath of October 7th.
I'll take that as a no.
It is a shame that you're going to the...
Okay, all right. I'm going to bring Senator Wu in there before we move on.
Been rebuffed.
That couldn't be clearer. That could not be clearer.
Nobody talks about October 7th now.
Okay, Senator Wu, give me your impression on where we stand, and in particular, the comment or the message from Jake that the international community has done its part, it's done everything it can, but it's the Palestinians themselves that have let the international community down. What's your take on all of that?
Look, I'm going to pick up on this idea that a Palestinian state is a reward for Hamas, and the fact that Hamas would celebrate its recognition is a sign that it's the wrong decision. This is a specious argument because it assumes that other Palestinians, the vast majority, all Palestinians, for a very long time, even before Hamas, even after Hamas ceases to exist, want to have a Palestinian state. It is an argument that's simply used to try to focus on Hamas, which has been severely weakened. Look, Jake talks about the butcher's shop and the butchery that's been taking place. Well, that butchery is on the side of Israel. We have seen butchery for the last 24 months now. And that is what we need to focus on. Because if we get distracted by conversations about whether Hamas is celebrating the Palestinian state, we will be overlooking the slaughter that's taking place. And that's why, while I celebrate and congratulate Britain and France and Canada for making this symbolic step, the real challenge is making something of it, stopping the slaughter, enabling Palestine to become fully recognized and having the rights of other states as well. That is the challenge before the countries, not just making an empty statement at the United Nations.
So let's move on to our second segment here, where we look at the implications of this. Some of the criticism around the recognition of a Palestinian state is that it simply won't change anything on the ground. It's purely symbolic. But even if that's true, it could also be argued that it's also symbolic of changing global attitudes towards Israel and its current actions in Gaza. Jake, is this a turning point in international support for Israel? Netanyahu himself has referred to Israel as Super Sparta of the Middle East, referencing its isolation.
Yeah, it's deeply regretful. And as the previous speaker just illustrated, there is a worldwide drive to draw an equivalence between a war in Gaza, which is one that Israel did not choose, did not start, did not want, but was compelled to wage because Hamas destroyed, killed, murdered, mutilated 1,200 of its citizens and took hostages who are still there today. Israel couldn't avoid that war. There's an attempt to conflate that with terrorism on Israeli civilians. Our Canadian friend just did that explicitly, equivocating or drawing an equivalence between the Second Intifada and the war in Gaza. One is a terror organization attacking innocent people while they're going to school, while they're going about their day jobs in suicide bombs. and the other is an attempt
is
to
a
destroy
genocide.
Hamas and release the hostages. It couldn't be clearer. So I'm afraid that while the world increasingly falls under this total delusion, mistaking war for genocide willfully and falling for the propaganda, then international isolation is growing on Israel. And I'm afraid to say that the result of this wall of hostility towards Israel at the United Nations is going to be to evoke an even stronger backlash from Israel, which will also be counterproductive. We can see the Israeli right wing, who regrettably, the far right, who regrettably have positions in the government at the moment, becoming emboldened by this, and a response from Israel saying, look, if you're going to do a unilateral declaration of independence or recognition for Palestine, we're going to take unilateral actions as well on the West Bank. That is only going to lead to more conflict, more bloodshed, and more unrest in the years to come. It's an absolute tragedy that people have forgotten which side is democracy and which side is the jihadis.
Senator Wu?
Here's another specious argument where you're trying to say that you're trying to give justification for the actions of the far-right government, which Netanyahu supports.
I should clarify, I'm not justifying it.
Which has been in the cards for 2 years already. What we have seen from the West is a lack of action, is an indulging of the Netanyahu government, is a complacency, a willingness to look away from the atrocities that Israel has committed in Gaza. And what has that yielded? More extreme actions. To suggest that recognition of Palestine is going to be the trigger for even more right-wing action is simply a fallacy and something that cannot be tolerated.
So, Senator, I assume that you would unequivocally condemn October the 7th, because you haven't mentioned it so far, all the hostages.
I do. But why do I have to have a litmus test of that sort? I condemn all the I condemn the bombings of innocent civilians.
That's why. Just because you haven't mentioned it, that's all. It seems like you're editing something out.
How about you?
It seems like you're missing an important piece of the puzzle here.
How about you? Are you unequivocal?
No.
How about the killing of children in hospitals? Jake?
Of course. Any killing of children in hospitals that's in...
Then we're on the same page.
We're not on the same page because you, I'm afraid, are mistaking a war for a genocide and mistaking a democracy for a fascist state. And you're on the side of a non-democracy at best and a jihadi state at worst.
How could Israel be a democracy and an occupier at the same time? Let me ask you, Jake,
I'm afraid you have lost your moral...
Let me ask you one question. Can you... Would you consider West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem an occupying land? I'm asking you this question.
I'm afraid, sir, in my mind, you've lost your moral authority by failing to condemn October the 7th.
Okay, we're not going to descend into who has defended what. Ambassador, I want to ask you specifically. Recognition has prompted almost unanimous condemnation across the political spectrum in Israel. And after a period of so much internal division, could this move not backfire? Instead of pressuring Israel, could Netanyahu use this to galvanise his grip on power? Could things just turn out worse?
Well, that's Jake's argument, isn't it? But look, what has been the record of the last 24 months? The West has been coddling Netanyahu, has been indulging his actions, and he has rewarded the world with more atrocities. We have given warnings, let humanitarian aid go in. We're going to ramp up sanctions if you don't do so. We didn't ramp up sanctions. And what did he do? He continued to block humanitarian aid going in. So the carrot, if that's what you're asking about, the carrot has not worked. And I'm not saying recognition of Palestine is a stick, but it's what Palestinians deserve. What comes after is what counts. You're absolutely right. It's only symbolic if we don't stop the slaughter.
Ambassador, what do you think? I mean, Jake raised the point that this could lead to unilateral support from Israel annexing the West Bank, as some of the far-right ministers are calling for. I mean, could this whole conversation around recognition backfire?
No, I don't think so, because Israel should understand that the time is ripe now to believe that there is no military solution to this conflict. They have to understand using power is not going to make the Palestinians succumb. Palestinians will continue their struggle for self-determination, and the international community now is on the side of the Palestinians because we deserve to have our own independent state. And we are talking about only 22% of historic Palestine, where our independent state have been recognized by major countries, by almost 147 countries in the world. So there are also some Jewish people, Israelis, who are for the two-state solution. Many of them want to end this hostage ordeal. They are begging Netanyahu to stop this carnage and get the hostages home, where we want to see them also safe, as our people will be safe from the bombardment that is taking place on every day, killing children, mosques, churches, and what have you. Everybody wants this war to end because this is crazy. When is Netanyahu going to understand that this is against humanity, what he is doing, and that there is no way out of this quagmire is to accept the recognition of the state of Palestine and to stop this war? Because Israel, the public opinion in Israel is shifting, and the opposition is shifting towards, reconciliation basically with the Palestinian people. They see children are dying. They see the weaponization of humanitarian aid and food, in trying to make the children suffer. What can we do more than this? Is another 100,000 will quench the thirst of blood for Mr. Netanyahu and his government? Where do we stand in terms of democracy that he is alleging that Israel is a democratic entity? Where is this democracy? This is the utter hypocrisy. You cannot be democracy and at the same time occupying 7 million people who are struggling to have their own independence.
So, Jake, if you don't agree with the concept of a Palestinian state, what's the alternative? What's the solution here to this ongoing continuous border dispute?
Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I don't believe in a Palestinian state. I would like to see a safe and secure Palestinian state. Absolutely. I would like to be totally clear about that. Unfortunately, however, it would need to be a state that renounces terrorism, renounces support for terrorism, recognizes Israel not just by paying lip service, but properly and genuinely, and wishes to extend the hand of peace to Israel. And those things are not forthcoming. At the moment, we see it becoming increasingly a client state of Iran, infested with terror. Of course, in Gaza, it's explicitly run by terrorists. It's a terrorist enclave. And on the West Bank, as I've said, Mahmoud Abbas, who is enjoying the 21st year of his 4-year term, pays money, continues to pay money, rewards from public funds to anybody convicted of terrorism. And textbooks in Palestinian schools continue to incite anti-Semitic hatred. The state media continues to incite anti-Semitic hatred. Mahmoud Abbas himself has a PhD in Holocaust revisionism. Just before October the 7th, by the way, he made a speech, which you might remember, where he said that Hitler did not kill the Jews because they were Jews, but simply because they were engaged in usury. This is the sort of people we're talking about. And from Israel's point of view, there's no way that it can withdraw to the 1967 borders, give a state to this sort of rabble, and then, I'm not talking about rabble as in the Palestinian people, but the leadership. I have only respect for the Palestinian people. I should make that very clear as well. And expect security to be withheld. Unfortunately, what would happen is October the 7th would happen again and again and again, as Hamas has explicitly said that it intends to do. And so, therefore, I think that the solution right now can't be this sort of state under these circumstances. Maybe there are other ways forward. Maybe there are ways. The leaders in Hebron talked about breaking off from the Palestinian Authority and forming separate peace with Israel on a clan basis. That could be a way forward, perhaps in the longer run. But at the moment, it's an impasse, unfortunately, caused by Palestinian rejectionism and embrace of terrorism.
Can I respond to him, please?
Please.
Yes. First of all, you are accusing a president that has signed security arrangements with Israel. And you tell me how many times the Palestinians have defied that security arrangement in the West Bank. You're talking about a pragmatic president who have been choosing between the constraints that Israel has been putting upon. You're talking about a president who have been trying not to unleash the West Bank, with their resistance against, and he's talking about peaceful resistance, never armed resistance. You're talking about a president who has accepted the two-state solution through the Oslo Agreement and said that both peoples could live side by side. You're talking about a president who believed in democracy. We're trying to hold elections in the occupied territories. Israel has been circumventing that because they don't want our people in Jerusalem, to go and vote. We're talking about reforms. We have done the reforms in our books. We have been funded by the Europeans because they checked our books and they have seen that there are no incitements there. And still you are using the old rhetoric of incitements, terrorism, and what have you. What do we have with Iran? How dare you consider, the West Bank, being a puppet to Iran and what have you? We are Sunni Muslims. We have nothing to do with Iran. Iran has its own agenda in the Middle East. President Abbas has never, ever accepted to be part and parcel of what is going on in southern Lebanon. So don't try to smear the image of our president as being a terrorist. He has extended his hand so many times to Netanyahu and to others. We almost had an arrangement in 2008, with Olmert at that time, when he was prime minister. So you negate all these activities. And now you dub even President Abbas and the leadership in the West Bank as terrorists while we are controlling all kinds of security arrangements so as to make sure the soldiers that are lost in the West Bank, we take them and give them to the Israelis. We don't take them hostages as you are claiming that we are terrorists. I mean, this rhetoric is absurd and rubbish, sir. I don't respect what you talk about my president, neither about, the Palestinian people in general. And don't be a hypocrite by saying that, yes, you want a state of Palestine. No, people like you want Eretz Israel that will extend beyond the West Bank, go to Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria, and Lebanon. This is the actual Zionist project, and don't be shy from this because everybody knows this. That's why the international community has been saying enough is enough for Israel. And I hope that they will start sanctioning Israel, boycotting them, no trade relations. And this is when I believe that the concretization of an independent Palestinian state will come through.
We're sort of opening up onto what we want to talk about in our third and final segment, which is how does this actually be implemented? How does it look? Who governs a Palestinian state? How do we make it from words to reality? Simply saying that a country recognises Palestine is one thing, but to put those words into action is something entirely different. Because for many countries, there are caveats included in their recognition, and that also includes the removal of Hamas from Gaza and potentially the installation, in some cases, of peacekeeping forces, two things that Hamas has previously said it would not accept. So, Senator Wu, let's bring you in on this, because I know there are caveats to Canada's recognition as well. Can a Palestinian state be implemented without Hamas agreeing to disarm and move out of Gaza?
Well, that's not the condition under which Canada, anyway, has recognized Palestine. Canada has imposed the condition that Hamas not be part of the leadership, that it disarm entirely, and that the Palestinian Authority have some sort of a governance reform and elections.
But if Hamas is saying it's not willing to relinquish its control, how do you see a Palestinian state going forward?
Well, to work with the Palestinian Authority, I mean, that is the only way that can be done. And this is why I say the approach that the Canadian government and the British and the French are taking seem very unrealistic to me. And I would rather see them take action to stop the slaughter immediately. But recognition of the Palestinian state, I think, adds ammunition for more concrete actions, such as the sort the ambassador has talked about. Full sanctions, for example, embargoes on trade, sanctions on cabinet ministers, all of the cabinet, rather than just the extremists. These are the new tools, I think, that recognition of the Palestinian state has given to Canada, at least, maybe not for Britain and France.
Ambassador, I mean, Jake has raised some concerns about the legitimacy of the Palestinian government at this current point in time. I mean, if Hamas says it will continue to have a presence in Gaza, the PA doesn't want it to. I mean, how does this actually go from words in the UN General Assembly to actual reality on the ground?
First of all, the international community and the United States should empower the Palestinian leadership in the occupied territories, which means that they should empower President Abbas to come forward and give him the opportunity to come to Gaza and try basically to start from there after the dust settles. Now, we have conditions for Hamas to be part and parcel of this political system. The quartet has conditions. First of all, the recognition of the state of Israel. If Hamas meets the four conditions and that there should be no military kind of action, violence should be stopped aside. These are conditions that even the Palestinian leadership has adopted when they became part and parcel, of the global recognition of the PLO. So we are putting the same conditions on Hamas. If Hamas does not want to recognize the state of Israel as a faction, that's fine. But if they want to be part and parcel of a future government, a democratic government based on elections, they should accept the four conditions. They should accept that the Palestinian state should be on the borders of 1967. So we have put also our conditions on Hamas. And if Hamas does not want to deal with that, then we will see what the outcome will be. But first of all, our interest is to stop this war. And then politics come later, negotiations come later, concessions come later, reconciliation comes later. But we don't just take an excuse of what Hamas believes or doesn't believe. Even if Hamas gives up its arms, Hamas is not going to be obliterated because Hamas is an ideology. It says Islamic fundamentalism. It will never reconcile with secularism as the PLO has been for the last, 40 years. So let us not put the cart before the horse and assume that, if Hamas does this, Hamas does that. Also, Hamas is tired of the war. Hamas also have been targeted, have been killed, have been assassinated, have no control over Gaza anymore. So, why do you talk on one side of the and not the other? Who has the power to stop the war? Hamas or the state terrorism of Israel? I will ask this question.
Jake?
Well, I'll answer it if you like. Hamas has the power to end the war by releasing the hostages. Do you have any other questions?
No.
No. I note it's interesting that you're equally unable to.
Let me tell you what Hamas will do. Although I'm not Hamas, I don't speak on part of Hamas. Hamas has nothing to do with me. I'm a secular Palestinian nationalist who believe in the national rights of the Palestinian people. Let me tell you this. If tomorrow Israel stops the bombing and starts withdrawing from Gaza City as a gesture for having reconciliation, I think Hamas is ready to give up the 40 hostages.
Okay, all right. Well,
we'll see.
Good.
We'll see.
Good. I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting that you're equally unable to condemn your corrupt, brutal, authoritarian anti-Semite of a president as you are to condemn October the 7th. Both of those I condemn.
I don't condemn. I don't condemn my president.
No,
and we
exactly.
are not terrorists. Your settlers are terrorists. Your settlers are terrorists, not the Palestinian people. We are not infringing on their rights. They are infringing on our rights, grabbing land, killing people, acting like gun home mentality. And you're talking about my president who have been collaborating with Israel in terms of security, and you tell me that he's a terrorist? Come on, man.
None of it justifies the killing of hundreds of thousands of civilians.
Let's give Jake a right of reply. Jake,
None
go
of it
ahead.
justifies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being
Well, I was
subjected to
saying
quite a lot
that
of ranting from... Please, after you, sir.
none of it justifies the killing of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. Whatever you may say about corruption and advocacy of acts that you don't condone, Israel has gone well beyond its right of self-defense, and that's what we need to focus our attention. That has to be put to an end.
Can I just respond with one sentence?
Very quickly, Ambassador. I want to give Jake the right of reply.
Quick, and I will stop. One simple question to you. Prime Minister Netanyahu, for selfish reasons, because he is corrupt and he will be indicted as soon as this war is over. Don't preach me about corruption while the Prime Minister of Israel is corrupt. Hundreds of thousands of people are being maimed and killed because of his selfish motive of prolonging this war in order to avoid being indicted once this war is over. The Jews, I respect them, and I respect the Israelis, that they don't let corrupt people like Netanyahu and others to get off the hook. And this is my answer to you. So don't dare to talk about my president being corrupt. The Prime Minister of Israel is corrupt.
Okay, Jake, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to all those comments. I also want to ask you a question. Before he left to have his time at the UN General Assembly, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a statement, a Palestinian state will not be established west of the Jordan River. He was very adamant that under his watch there would be no Palestinian state. So, I mean, it takes two to come to a peaceful agreement, doesn't it?
Yes, it would take two to come to a peaceful agreement, of course, yes.
So is it disappointing then to hear that the Prime Minister is not willing to have a dialogue?
Well, I mean, I think that what we're seeing really is the manipulation of world opinion by Hamas and by their propaganda, which has been shamefully picked up by the United Nations, by the world's great swathes of the world's media, by hostile actors on social media, and activists in Islamist organizations around the West, and they've made a war of self-defense which is legitimate, carried out without any choice by Israel, and presented it as a genocide. Hamas really started this war with propaganda in mind. It didn't think that it would be able to beat the IDF or win. It knew that its civilians would be killed. That was the whole point of the war, to place civilians in harm's way. Let's not forget that every single civilian in Gaza could fit in the terror tunnels under the ground and be safe from bombardment, but not a single one has been allowed in because Hamas wishes them to suffer, to experience death, injury, and so forth for the benefit of the world's media, to influence people like our Canadian senator friend to believe their propaganda and think that Israel is carrying out some kind of genocide, when actually what we are seeing is a legitimate war against a jihadi enemy that would kill him if it got its hands on him too. The West has been persuaded, unfortunately, to side with its own enemies, to side with the forces of jihad, which would overcome its own interests if it could as well. And so this kind of moral inversion, where a liberal Western-style democracy in the Middle East, the only democracy in the Middle East, is being pilloried as genocidal and exterminatory and all the other things, slurs which have been around almost since the beginning of Israel's existence. And the side which launched the war, which still refuses to give up the hostages, which everyone seems to have conveniently forgotten about, is being lauded as some kind of resistance and rewarded with the state. It's been celebrating in the streets these past couple of days. It's deplorable, and I can't believe that I'm the only person making this argument here today.
Can I respond very quickly, please?
Very briefly, and then we'll wrap up, Ambassador.
Yes. I want to ask Jake. Millions, hundreds of millions have been on the streets of Europe, America, Canada, Australia. Every single human being there had been raising the Palestinian flag and saying, "Free Palestine." Have you seen a green flag or any kind of chanting for the support of Hamas?
Yes.
Why do you just take Hamas and you are neglecting the entire Palestinian people that have been thirsty to have their own independence?
Listen, as I said before, I'm completely a supporter of a Palestinian state, but under conditions which are reasonable for Israel's security.
I'll give you a final word, Senator Wu, before we wrap up.
Well, under those conditions and under the disingenuous arguments that Jake and his Israeli friends are putting forward, there will never be a Palestinian state. Let's be clear about it. So let's not be subject to false arguments about.
Sorry, Senator. Senator,
Hamas,
you are a politician. That you must choose corruption. You must choose your words. Excuse me. You must choose your words carefully. What leads you to describe what I've been saying in earnest and in sincerity as disingenuous? What evidence do you have that could possibly suggest you that you could reasonably back up that allegation? It seems like quite an ad hominem, shameful allegation to me.
The idea that somehow, if Hamas were only a little different, if Hamas would only give up its hostages, if they would only accede to all of the requests that are being put on them by Israel, there would be peace and that a Palestinian state would emerge. I do not believe that to be true.
I didn't make that argument.
I do not believe that true at all. And while I accept that you believe in a Palestinian state, I think you're being unrealistic. And you're misleading.
I did not make. You're putting words in. I would like to say I did not make that argument, and I would like you to withdraw the allegation that I've been disingenuous, for which you have no evidence at all.
I invite you to clarify, and I will be happy to listen to your clarification and to accept that. Please do.
Well, the ambassador asked me if I thought that there was a way that Hamas could end the war, and I said yes, it could end the war by releasing the hostages. That's a perfectly legitimate position, which I think you would probably agree with. But I would like you to withdraw the allegation that I've been. But I would like you to withdraw the allegation that I've been disingenuous, for which you have no evidence whatsoever. As a politician, you should be ashamed of making such an ad hominem attack on me.
What I would say is that the belief that the war would end and Israel would stop its atrocities and its expansionism only because Hamas would release the hostages, I believe to be untrue. Whether that's disingenuous or not, I'm happy to take it back. But I believe that assertion, which I think accurately reflects your view, that assertion is false. And that's my opinion. We can disagree.
So we have a difference of opinion, which you have framed as...
We do have a difference of opinion.
So you've taken it back, and thank you for that.
Gentlemen, I wish we had more time because I feel like there is so much more we can discuss, but unfortunately we are going to have to leave it there. But I appreciate all of your diverse perspectives and points of view. Your time is valuable to us here on Counterpoints, and we always enjoy having a robust discussion. Thank you to our guests, Yuen Wu, independent Canadian senator from British Columbia, Jake Wallace-Simons, author and Daily Telegraph columnist, and Professor Manuel Hassassian, the Palestinian ambassador to Denmark. Thank you to all of you for being on Counterpoints.
Thank you.
And as always, thank you to you for tuning in to this episode of Counterpoints. To keep up to date with our latest debates and interviews, be sure to subscribe to Al Arabiya English on YouTube. And don't forget to follow us on X and TikTok to catch more spicy debates like that one. We'll see you next time.